welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm Steve Lasker. I am a program manager in the Visual Studio Cloud Platform Tools team. We build tooling scenarios for cloud platforms, no surprise. One of the things that we've been doing a lot of is thinking about consuming services and in a modern way. And today I'm going to spend some time talking about the Force.NET SDK. It's an SDK that's been started by Wade Wegner. He actually is the owner and primary contributor. It is open source. He's developing it out on GitHub actively. I'm kind of surprised sometimes how fast he'll publish something out. I'm like, really? We just talked about that in email. So he pushes stuff out pretty quick. He's very responsive. He's taken a number of contributions from others. And we hope with the awareness we're doing here that more people will contribute and help there. The binaries are available as NuGet packages, and we'll see that in the demos here. Now, you might be kind of obvious and think about, of course, with a .NET SDK, that we're going to target the Microsoft common devices and services and technologies so that you can build these kind of apps. And a lot of things that I've been hearing people talk about this week are these console apps or Windows services that are doing integration. So it's kind of interesting to hear all of the scenarios that you guys are doing. What you might not be aware of is through our partnership with Xamarin, you can use C# and the .NET SDK to target iOS and Android devices. And this is a big part of some things that we're changing our position in Visual Studio, is that we want to be able to target the plethora of devices, even when they're not ours, because we have our services that we hope you'll use. We hope that you will target our devices, and we know that to do that, you need to consume other services, such as Salesforce. So engaging in things like the .NET SDK and partnering, in fact, they're going to contribute into the .NET Foundation, that we believe that we can continue to drive these tooling scenarios and make it more productive and just drive a better partnership overall. There was a conversation recently, I think it was Satya was talking about it, is no one platform can rule them all. We all tried, didn't work. It's all about integration. So that's what we want to show. So what I'll cover today, I want to do two basic demos. I'm going to do a hello world of services, just to consume that, to go over the basic APIs to get you guys comfortable and familiar. And then I'm going to race ahead to the other end of the spectrum and show you what we can do when we actually brought a RESTful service into something like a C# language, and VB as well, and bring something like SAP in, and then reshape that data to return to other devices. Or it might be a console up in a Windows services. What I'm not going to have a chance to cover today was some of the content that I hopefully you weren't totally set on that for the abstract. Wade asked me to cover this just late last week and gives me this pointer to this hour and 15-minute long session on how we built the SDK and drilled into details. And by the way, get it done in 30 minutes. And go get the other Apple devices so I can compile on them. And I didn't have a chance to do that. So what I hope you'll see is some new stuff that we haven't really talked about yet. And of course, you can reference his longer session, which is a great session, by the way. I definitely recommend taking a look at that. So let's just jump right in. We're going to do a hello world here of services. So I'm going to build a console app here. And the first thing I want to do is bring in this SDK that we're talking about. Now, Wade's a console guy. He likes to type everything. I like to point and click and select from. I guess that kind of makes me a Salesforce kind of person here, because it is much easier, and if I can type here. And we'll go out, and we're going to search for Salesforce NuGet packages that are available. And of course, Wade's is right here for the developer force.force SDK. And that's the core one. And there's some other samples in here as well, and Jonathan will talk about those later today and later this week as well. So I'll bring in that NuGet package, and it will bring in all the references that we need. And we'll just accept the various licenses. And it'll set up my project for consuming that. And this is what we can do with all the NuGet packages. And we're also working for Cordova effort to bring in things like NPM and Bower. Now, once I've got that, what's the next thing I need to do to talk to Salesforce? I need a connected app. Right? So with Salesforce, and you have this new model now. Sorry, we'll just click this link. It helps me get there quicker. If I go to Setup, and we go to Create Apps, with these modern REST and SOAP endpoints, you need to actually set up an auth scope. So we're going to create a new connected app. We'll pop in some values here. And I need to create an OAuth endpoint, even though it's a console app. So I'll just give myself a little redirect there. And for security, we're developers, so we're just going to issue all access, and we'll figure it out later. The IT guys are going, damn him. All right. So now I've got my connected app, and I've got the magic pieces I need. So let me come back over here, and we're going to add some code. So I've set up my connected app in Salesforce, but now I need to consume it. So I got just some snippets that I'll use here. And what I need to do is get the client ID and secret. So we switch between client ID and consumer key, and it is a little confusing. I keep on meaning to ask Wade what was that about, but now it is a secret, so we got to cover it and expand it. The security guys get so wrapped up in security. It's kind of annoying. All right. Now, in this path, I'm going to do the username and password flow. It's a console app. It's running without user input, possibly. It might be running a scheduled job. So I'm going to pass in my username, a password. And I didn't mean to make fun of Salesforce 1. I just put Microsoft and the number 1, so I had too many snippets to go change. So no mimicking intended there. Now, if I don't set up IP filtering, I need to pass in a security token, which gets concatenated to the password. And there's a security token you have to reset, and there's some good articles on Salesforce for finding that. Don't forget it, because you can't retrieve it. You have to reset it, and then any apps that are using it are then broken. So we'll save that. Sorry, actually, I'm back in here. So now that I have that, what I want to be able to do is, using the SDK, I'm going to create an authentication client. Sorry, not authentication client, new authentication. And we'll bring it, no. I brought in this. Salesforce, all right, hold on. Salesforce.common.authentication. Oh, it is authentication client, sorry. And then on the authentication client, I want to do username password async. So this is where I'm going to wrap up all the details of having to set the headers, getting the refresh token, getting all that goo back that, as a productive developer, I don't want to deal with that low-level details. That's where the SDK comes in. It's really just a thin wrapper around the REST APIs that are there. Client secret, the username, and of course the password. And the password concatenates that security token as well. So now that I've got authentication solved, now I need to make queries over the REST APIs. And it's pretty simple. All I'm going to do is say var client equals new force client, and it is under the Salesforce.force namespace, and it takes the parameters from the authentication client. So I'll say auth.instance.url, auth.access_token, auth.API version. Now, the thing that you're going to find is the SDK uses the async pattern, because that's just goodness. The badness is trying to figure the damn thing out. Right? I've struggled more trying to get my head around TPL than I did trying to use the SDK. And I'm going to highlight a couple places there. In here, because it's a console app, and I'm not trying to free up threads to something else, I'm literally just going to do more synchronous. I'm going to force it to be synchronous. So I'm going to call not there, actually here is where I need to call wait, because this is the asynchronous call. So notice one of the changes Wade did a couple of versions ago was he added the async keyword to each method so you know these are async calls. So the client is just instancing it up. So now I can say var, what am I trying to do here? Contacts, or is it results? Actually, I had a query for this, Salesforce query. And what I'm going to do is I've created some snippets here to help with some of this. The way query async works, right? So I got client.query async. And how many of you guys have worked with types that basically we can do of type, of T, right? Very cool features that were added back when we did some of the link work years ago. And what it allows me to do is have a method of a particular type. Query result is of type T, and here, instead of passing in a contact object, I'm going to say, give me a dynamic object. Build it on the fly. So I'm going to build one on the fly. It's actually of type task, which is the thing that handles all the async programming. So there's a little bit of a Turduncan thing happening here that you just need to unravel in your head. And then the query async just takes a SOQL query. Now, you guys that thought we got rid of T-SQL and went to Link and life was wonderful, you joined Salesforce and we got nice SOQL, which personally I like. So I'm fine with that. So let's just fix the query result there. It's in the models namespace, and we're good to go. So we've got our results. And what I want to do is say results. This is where the async stuff is. Notice it's async state, create options, exceptions, and wait. So this is where I'm going to say that results, which is a task, I want it to wait for the result. And then I'm going to say var contacts equals results dot result. Again, kind of get your head wrapped around it. That is the result of the task. And it has, notice the lowercase first letters. We're starting to see we're bridging into REST and JSON. So these are the properties that you would normally get back in REST, including the total size. If you've got batching and you've got, I don't know if the default is 1,000 or not, but if you want to get more, you get the next results URL or the actual data that you want here. Okay, so let's see. Sorry, let me get myself caught up here. All right, so I got my records. So now I can just do a for each, and I'm going to say for each contact in contacts, and then I'm just going to say, because I'm in a console, dot write line, and I'm going to say contact dot. Why am I not getting anything? Dynamic. Shirts. Somebody said shirts. Somebody else back there, saving the purple ones. I don't care who gets it. Just pass it back to whoever talked or just keep it. I don't care. All right. So that's the beauty. So with the dynamics, it basically tells the compiler option explicit off for those VB folks out there. And it's very nice because it focuses just on that object. So I can type anything I want here. And the compiler is going to be fine. The runtime is going to be fine. Of course, when it actually tries to call that, it'll blow up. So I don't really want that. So I'm going to leave that here for now. And we'll write that out. And let me just get a little press any key to continue. And I'll run this guy. So I've queried out. I've got my auth client. I've done the query. I pulled it back. And even with dynamic types, I was able to pull it back because I typed the right thing. So there's an interesting balance there. I happen to be not a console guy, so I get a little insulted when I see that kind of color. So I'm going to do something a little more retro. A little more retro. A little more retro. There we go. So that's great UI. I was going to make it gray and do the WinForms Battleship gray, but anyway. All right. So we've got our read. Now, of course, while we talk about the world is 90% read, we do need to make changes. So I've got some, let's see, we will first create, console create. So I'm going to create a new contact. Here, instead of dynamic types, which are completely unknown until runtime, I'm going to use what's referred to as anonymous types. And anonymous types, I'm basically declaring it in code. I don't actually declare a class. I just say, here's a thing, and here's the properties on it. So who do we want to create? Hillary Duff. Wait, no, we got to do that. Actually, no, this is being recorded. I'm not going to do that. Steve Rogers, I don't even know who that is, but is he the guy? Oh. All right, well, he's on Elm Street with Freddie. All right, so we're going to create him. And notice that what I do is I got that anonymous type, and if I look here, whoops, that's not what I meant to do. Contact dot first name, right? So I actually do have a real type here, and it will give me errors if I don't type it right. So I'm then going to do a client, right? That Salesforce client, and there's a pattern here. For create async, I will give it the Salesforce object name, and then I will give it the object that I want the JSON serializer to stuff onto that REST API and give me back the results. It gives me back a task. Remember that TPL stuff I was talking about, the task programming language. And I'm going to get back the result of the task, which happens to be the ID that I just created. And to show that, we're going to go query the thing that we just created. And so now I'm going to do a query async again with dynamic, but this time I'm going to pass in a parameter. And it's still a SOQL query. I'm just using string format to stuff those values together to try to not get lost in all the quotes that are in there. And of course, use the workbench tools to go test that, paste that in, and there you go. Now, the way query async works is we don't know whether it's one or more rows. Wade, SDK, whatever, REST. So it's always going to bring back a collection, a query result of T. So what I want to be able to do is find that first one. Again, the task is the result, then the records on that query result, and I want the first or default using those extension methods. I don't have to create up a for each array and grab the first one out of it. And once we've got the one back, I'm going to do a little update. And I was going to do Freddie and make him Fredward, so Steve becomes Fredward. And same pattern, right? Salesforce object. The ID, the ID that I want to update, which is really nice in Salesforce that you have single properties that are IDs. Thank you for not having to manage, complex primary keys. And I just pass in the object. Now, when we did the connected services stuff, when we started scaffolding out objects, we realized that this thing doesn't want to take properties that are not creatable and updatable. So this is where the dynamic and anonymous types can help you because you can filter them out. But in the latest version of the SDK, the Salesforce SDK, we've added creatable and updatable attributes so you can read them back, and then when we do an update or create, it knows to not serialize those properties. Because it's a task, we tell it to wait because we're in this, we don't want to do asynchronous in this thing. And lastly, we're going to delete it. And, same thing, object and the ID that I want to delete. So we will run this. I think I've got everything running here. And if life is good, we get the any key to continue. And we have created Steve. I guess there's more than one now. We've queried them back. We got the ID, found Steve, and we've made him Fredward. And we then went off and delete them. Okay? Pretty basic. That's the beauty of REST. And we've just put a thin wrapper on the SDK to make that .netify it. All right, so let's get a little more interesting. Was that helpful? Okay, cool. So now the world, as we said, is not all one. I have data in multiple places. SAP is another partner I work with, also great to work with. What I want to be able to do is go take an email, expose a web API, go off and get the contact who's my customer in Salesforce, and then go find the products they've bought in SAP. I want to return that, and in this case, I'm going to return it as a JSON result that I could consume from lots of different devices. I could consume it in a console app, a Windows Service app, whatever you might want to do. So let's go do that. So this time, I'm going to create a web app, and I'm going to, let's see, we'll call this the Contoso Repair Manager again. And I'm going to check the checkbox for Web API, and all that does is just set up a number of the references and the configuration for me. Of course, I can do it by hand, but it's nice that I don't have to. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a reference to SAP, because I'm going to go old school here. And we're going to add a service reference. And what we're seeing here is not that I'm stuttering, but this is where the service reference dialog actually doesn't know that it's SAP in specific. And with SAP, they're doing redirects to go get the metadata for the OData feed, and this thing just gets confused. Now, we brought that in. That's good. That's fine. But now I want to consume Salesforce, and I want to use the SDK. However, what I want to do is I don't want to take the time to do all that stuff I did in the previous step for creating the connected app. I don't want my config in code. I want my config in the config files, and I want to read from that. And I would like to avoid using dynamic and anonymous types. I want to get this rich data that's available on the Salesforce APIs with the Describe API. So I'm going to use the new configuration stuff we've been working on, and I'm going to breeze through it because I really wanted to focus on the SDK here. And I'll go through, and one of the things I'm going to do here is choose to scaffold all of the objects in the Salesforce REST API. Now, there's a preview. We will obviously give you a tree view to select the 2 or 3 that you might want, but that'll really help my productivity. Now, there's nothing here that I did that you couldn't do yourself, right? That's the beauty of the configuration tool. It's just doing the work that I don't have to type myself. So I'm going to go over here, and we'll notice that it did create a Contoso Repair Manager. It created this connected app. It set up the auth scopes for me, including actually, no, that one. That was the console app. This one. All right, now I'm confused. Let's do that again. Contoso Repair Manager. I'm not sure why it's VS Connected Service. Oh, because I did see, oh, I know why. All right, never mind. I'm confusing myself here. Too many demos. So if I go down to web config, we have configured that service, and we've got the consumer key. Because I chose the username and password flow, we've also got those config values, but we don't have those in there. And I need to get the consumer secret. Because it's a secret, we can't query it on the API, so I'll fill that in. And then I'm going to just put in a couple of values here for my consumer password and security token. All right, so we've got everything set up except the values that, just a couple more pieces I've got to put in. We'll work on finishing that up as well. So now I've got my 2 services set up for me. I'm going to add a new folder so I can actually create my web API. And inside of that, I'm going to say add new controller, and we'll do a web API 2 empty controller because we're going to fill it out, and it's the customer controller. All right, so we've got a controller. This is what I'm going to expose for people to pass in an email. So we'll say public async task, and the task I'm going to return a models.customer product. This is the shape of the thing that I want to return. And I'm going to return it by passing in an email. And let's just fix up the task. and we'll come in and finish populating our product type. We'll make this public, and we'll do the customer product. We're going to add a couple of properties here. So this is the shape of the thing that I want to return. Salesforce has got a lot of data on the contact object. SAP is going to have a lot of data on the business partner, sales order, line item, and product object. I want to shape it just the way that I want to expose. And this customer product has a collection of products, and we will define the schema here. And so now I've got the properties there. All right? So that is the, quote, contract that I will return. And we'll just do a little cleanup and put this up in models. So now's where it gets fun. So what I can do here is now I get back to the coding I want to do with the Salesforce SDK. So I'm going to create a client here equals Salesforce service, and I make it new, .getForceClient. Notice I didn't have to do some of the work I did prior because it's already configured for me here in the class that we generated as part of the Add Connected Service experience. It's no different than the code we hope that you would have written, so there's no magic here. We just have some of that for you, so I can get back to writing the business components of my app that I want to. So we'll do a Salesforce query, this time with parameters. And I'm going to get a var called contacts. This time I am using the async awaits pattern. So I'm going to tell it await. And instead of dynamic, I'm going to say models.salesforce.contact. And that's the contact object I want to bring back. And I'm going to issue this query, but I also want the SAP ID _ C from contact where email. Right? Because that's some properties I have in that. So just using the SDK, writing that SOCL query, bringing it back, I've got my auth set up. And now is where I get myself, do some memory here. All right, so now I need to instance the SAP one. Web API, where do I have that? Instance SAP. So let me just fix the encoding here because I wasn't ready for you guys to steal that username and password. And we will instance that service reference. And that's just a no data feed. We'll pull that back and we'll take advantage of that as well. So now I'm going to query that guy back. Let's see, var SAP, whoops. SAP, no, what was I doing here? Query equals from BP in SAP context .business partner collection where BP.businessPartner equals, I can get my Salesforce contact.SAP ID. And then I'm going to say select BP. Now, I don't actually want the _ C to be in my code all the time. Why is that giving me errors? Oh, I know why, because it didn't do equal. See, you do have to stutter sometimes. Now, if I go to the object that I took back, in my code, I don't want to refer to _ C. So I'm going to go get rid of that. We'll use a symbolic rename to fix it up in my code. And I'm using the JSON serializer here. And this is where, what's that saying, ride the backs of giants or something, or that even in the SDK, Wade didn't have to rewrite anything. He's using the JSON serializers. So the skills you know about working with Newtonsoft also apply here. Pretty cool? Who's been using the Newtonsoft stuff? Right? Very cool libraries in here. So now I'm starting to get that data back from Salesforce. I've used the property to go off and query SAP, and we've got our result. Now, there's one thing I need to do here is because I'm getting a full graph back from, let me fix that reference there. It's not a VP query, it's a BP query, business process query. I need to expand out and get sales order, items, and product. I want to get that whole graph. And then, let's see, now I can say var SAP customer with orders equals business partner sales orders dot first or default, right? Because I'm only expecting to get one back based on that ID. All right, I've got my data from Salesforce. I got my data from SAP. I've actually issued the query here when I say first or default. That's when it sends it across the wire. Now, I don't want to return the two individual things. I want to reshape it into my new one. So this is where it gets really kind of cool. Where do I have that? So take a look at this. So here, what I'm doing is I'm instancing up a customer products type, that thing I defined, it's the contract that I'm going to return. I then use the, not anonymous types, basically name value pairs, and then instead of having to say new, I can on the fly set the properties of that to the Salesforce contact I got back. I have a products collection on that, which I can use link to go query into that SAP object, grab all of the line items, and construct a product type by grabbing out the properties of it, including the warranty end date. I just add a year to it. No transforms, no big, funky things. I can just use link because I've created objects for that thing I returned, and I can morph it right here just in my code. It's all strongly typed. It's, dynamic types are really nice. I get it in JavaScript. It's kind of nice in here that when something changes, I can track the change all the way through my code. You guys are spoiled about this because Salesforce does this for you because they have declarative stuff. When you get into coding, you guys know that this can really be ugly. We call toList, gets the result, and now I can just return the customer products, and we'll take bets whether actually this is going to work or not. So we'll spin that up. I did create the ASP.NET MVC site as well, and we will just say, okay, we're going to say that's great. Whoops. API, that config was set up, that's for our controllers. And when I hit return on that, I didn't set a breakpoint, but we'll see. Actually, I meant to set a breakpoint on that. We'll just set a breakpoint and walk through that. So we're going to get the force client. Right? We've already got it set up for authentication inside the code, so I don't have to write that code every time. We are going to construct a query asynchronously, and if we watch, it'll flicker for a second. In fact, sometimes it'll flicker back over. I'm going to get the first or default because I'm only expecting one. We'll go get the SAP stuff, and notice that goes by quick because it didn't actually execute yet. It's still prepping the query. It's not until this line that it actually executes. And you noticed it flipped over to the browser because it freed up the thread to go back over. It was a little long enough for my machine to flip over. Now I've got those two objects back in memory, and now I can construct that result and serialize it over the wire. We can take all of this, go to a nice little tool here, format it, go to some level, and now with the power of Zoom, we can see our Salesforce object came back. That's the customer. And when I look at products, we can see there's a collection of products that I've returned from SAP as well. So I've got my contract. I've got it set up. I'm doing all the queries. Pretty cool? All right. Very cool. All right. I don't have the Tony Robbins things down. I'm sorry. I got to jump up and down. All right. So I'll practice that. All right. So that's what we just did, right? Pretty cool. I hope that there's ideas in there that you can build on it. So as far as what we covered, we did the hello world with console, right? Just that basic. There's other authentication models in there as well. There's the web server flow. Wade actually just put out a Owen provider so that you can actually use Salesforce as your identity provider when you're flowing through. That is pretty cool. We're working with Salesforce on some federated identities so that your app can use your corporate identity, let's say if it's an Azure AD, and you can flow that through into Salesforce so your user doesn't get reprompted. So there's some pretty cool stuff in the authentication client there. And then we show the aggregating of live data sources to that. And I hopefully got you excited about the SDK. Hopefully we've gotten you thinking about how you can start using Visual Studio to build apps with Salesforce. All right? And you can target new devices with products like Cordova and Xamarin, or you're building web APIs and you can feed that back into Salesforce. So with that, I will end with a plethora of links rather than making you look at another slide and forget which ones are there. So we've got some information up there, the NuGet, the GitHub where the product is being developed and you can step through it. Wade's session I put there, it's a great session, I definitely recommend watching it. If you want to be part of our early CTP for what I did with that configuration wizard, we'd love to see what you guys are building, hear some of the stuff you're doing. If you want to build another provider to plug into that, I'd love to talk to you about that as well, and some contact information. And then Jonathan's giving 2 other sessions on the SDK to help you drill down to the next levels as well. So with that, I'll thank you. I appreciate your time, appreciate you coming here versus some other sessions. And I'll wrap up and take any questions. Thanks. So I'm not sure if it's still being recorded. If you have questions, want to use the mic, I'll be around. I'll throw shirts. We've got stickers. Anybody? Yes.
So I noticed when we were interacting with the Force SDK, you use string concatenation for your so is there a way to not do that with this Force SDK, like parameterize your query?
So we don't have that today. I was thinking about that with Wade, and the only thing we do is we'd embed the same thing into the API. Like it's not like it's the ADO.NET thing. We have these parameter types, and you can pass those in. I think he's really focused on trying to keep it very thin over REST. So that's kind of the model we've got right now. Again, if you've got some cool ideas for it, not only can you just make recommendations on the GitHub account, but if you want to propose some pull requests, you can do that as well. You got a shirt already. So is the Xamarin product going to stick around for a while? There's a number of investors that have put up a lot of money that believe it will be. We've been having a great partnership with them as well. So yeah, I've been really impressed. I was bummed. I really wanted to do the demo of it today. I didn't have the time to pull all that together. They're released. They're doing some interesting stuff. I'm seeing a lot of good buzz from customers that are using it. They're continuing to improve the experiences. I would definitely recommend going on that path. I don't see it as any kind of pet project. It is a full-fledged company with some people that have been doing work in that space for a long time, and they've got a lot of great experience there. So I actually take it very seriously, and so do we. Did I give you one already? Anybody else? Yes. I'm going to stretch my arm throwing. Right, so if something changes in Salesforce, how do you bring that into your project? Because what I showed there is in the first demo I did dynamic types, which of course your code has to change because you're reading something. In the second demo where I actually scaffolded out the objects to match the schema that's in Salesforce, I have my code that we tooled that could get out of sync. So the tooling that I showed is an early preview. We are working in the after preview, we're going to do some reentrancy that we want to update your code using like Roslyn and doing code model stuff. So that's our goal. That's where we want to do it. Our approach is of what would you have done? Right? If we didn't have tooling and you changed something in Salesforce, you got to change your code. So what we're trying to do is do just what you did. to have the amazing productivity that you have in Salesforce requires a more declarative programming model. In here, in Visual Studio, in these tools, we think of code first. So we are trying to support you in your code. We can't really do the magic. But we hope that the reentrancy schema synchronizers that will actually do some pretty cool magic there. Is that kind of what you're looking at?